Yeah, the second question is impossible to answer. There's no way. And this is a political question. I think in a way, like no matter what I say, um, people will characterize me as being on one particular side of this. And let me say that I'm not really on any side. I can't even vote in the US. I'm a guest. Okay? I'm Canadian. And I'm very envious of our banking system in Canada. I could talk all day about that. But so this isn't a political thing for me. And I think that there are strong opinions on this idea of stimulus. Some people, many people from my alma mater, University of Chicago, won't even use the word stimulus. Right? So it's too loaded of a word. And then there's all of this argument as to what the impact, the dollar impact of stimulus. Like to be stimulative, then the government spends $1 and then you need to get more than $1 out of it. That's the idea of stimulus. But a lot of people argue that no, it's not $1, it's less than $1. Indeed, some people think it's negative if you take all the costs into account. So this is where I come from. And again, this is something I've been on the record. My blog, gardenofeden.com, if you look at some of the old postings when all of this is being proposed, this is not just ex post analysis. This is where I come from. I believe, in contrast to some of my colleagues at other institutions, that it is possible to have a stimulus. And the way that I look at it is that certain kind of long-term infrastructure type of investments could increase productivity in the long term and actually have more than $1 of benefit. You're not going to get it immediately. So if you want some sort of short-term fix, no, not going to work. But an investment in a good infrastructure, indeed investment in education, in human capital infrastructure is something that benefits a country for the very long term. The short-term stuff that is not related to infrastructure, it's not clear that it has the dollar impact. And I think that Americans have had a great lesson in Keynesian economics, unfortunately. And we've seen two examples of what I guess Milton Friedman especially warned about in terms of his permanent income hypothesis, that if you do something in the short term, it really doesn't affect behavior other than very short adjustments up and down. The way to actually change behavior is to have permanent changes, permanent being at least long term. So the two examples that immediately come to mind are the cash for clunkers, which might have been a good environmental policy, but if you look at the data, you see a spike in car sales just as that expires, and then it goes down below the trend line. And if you smooth it out, there's no impact, but we spent tax dollars which need to be repaid in the future to fund that. So that didn't make a lot of sense. The new housing or the new first house bonus, same thing in the data. You see housing spike just before it expires and then crash back down, and you smooth it out by putting a simple moving average. There's no impact. So again, these types of policies can basically shift from a year, 1 year to the current year. It doesn't do anything in terms of actually putting us on a different growth path. The large stimulus package, it's hard to tell. So would we be worse off? It's really hard to tell if it didn't occur. But one thing we do know is that we're faced with a debt situation in the U.S. that we've got to deal with now. It's affected our standing in the world. It's affected the flexibility that we've got to do something if if things got really, really ugly. Like right now, they aren't. Like we're in very slow growth. I actually am on record as saying that I do not forecast a typical recession. We're in a slow growth period. I don't see it. Our CFO survey that was just put out the other week, it's got employment growing at 1%, which is not great. It's got CapEx growing at 4.5%. Other indicators suggest to me that people are cautious, but this isn't, I expect a recession. If it was, then you start to slash. And the other big difference, and this is really important, is that there's almost no leverage amongst non-financial corporations in the US. If you look at net debt to assets, so net debt being the long-term debt, and then allow for the cash that they're holding, if you do that, then the leverage is just remarkably low. So basically, given all the uncertainty, and given that we are growing slowly, some cash has been generated. It's an insurance policy, and even if there was a typical recession, I don't think we'd see the slashing that we've seen in the past in 2008 especially. So that's just not going to occur. So I think that the US economy is on a track for slow growth. There could be disruptions, especially coming from Europe, and that's, as I said at the beginning, is the main risk. But I think that it's on the right track. The single biggest uncertainty right now is what the government is going to do. So we just don't know what the policy is going to be. That policy uncertainty is deadly. It creates risk. You don't want to create risk. You want to reduce risk. If you want growth, you need to reduce the risk. There can't be this policy uncertainty. It's simple investment math. So risk increases, the discount rate increases. The discount rate increases, fewer projects are positive net present value. Fewer projects positive net present value, less investment. Less investment, less employment growth. Less employment growth, less GDP growth, less tax revenue. This is pretty basic stuff. But unfortunately right now, we've got a lot of policy uncertainty, and the debt that we've got as a result of the stimulus and the slow growth in the economy, and it's not just the stimulus, obviously, is also a cloud that I think is holding the economy back.